So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to a real fan favourite, of course, because this is Helm's Deep. And today we do actually have a fully lore-friendly battle. Well, I say fully. It's almost the battle as it is from the movies because, well, aside from Lothlorien, this time Mirkwood have come to the aid of Rohan as they have retreated to Helm's Deep. So, Thranduil has arrived instead of Haldir, which is confusing. I suppose, he's finally done brushing his hair and he wants to get his hands dirty. But regardless, I mean, Helm's Deep is very self-explanatory. There's really no need to go through the map as it is. This is still the somewhat broken version of Helm's Deep. There are these mountains that are all around it. But yeah, I mean, this is the version of Helm's Deep where it's a little bit more difficult to get really big battles going because the backside of it, where more armies can be deployed, is currently not functioning. But hopefully now, with the renewed vigour in the development side of things, we'll get to see some of these maps back to their full glory sooner rather than later. But we'll go through the attacking armies first of all. 3 Isengard armies, I believe it will be. Dark Reaper Death, the edgy one himself, has returned for this one, and of course he's going to be fighting on the side of the Orcs. There are some Uruk-hai infantry, of course, which are going to be a very useful unit in this battle. They're very solid, but interestingly enough, Rohan and Mirkwood will have the infantry to deal with Uruk-hai. Rohan because of their AP, and Mirkwood just because of their overall quality, of course. But the Uruk-hai infantry is still going to be a solid choice nonetheless, because it really allows you to push in with a little bit more confidence that your infantry is going to be able to hold and do some damage in return longer than the other Orc factions, especially, even the Guardians of Khan Doom from Angmar. They're not quite capable of doing the same amount of damage as the Uruk-hai infantry, which is something that Isengard definitely have in their favour. Several units of them, of course. Also in the mix of the Uruk-hai Reavers, not sure if AP from Isengard is going to be really effective in this battle, because neither Rohan nor Mirkwood really pack on really heavy armor values, but the base attack will still be very useful, especially against Rohan, because Rohan also don't have a great deal of melee defense, to be honest with you, but Mirkwood do, so the Uruk-hai Reavers probably won't be so good if they come up against any Elven foes. But that's what the Uruk-hai Pikemen will be for. Obviously, neither of the two defending factions today have got access to any phalanx units, which is a pretty glaring weakness that both Rohan and Mirkwood both share. So considering the fact that they're going to be fighting alongside one another today, it's also an area in which Isengard, of course, are very strong with their Uruk-hai Pikemen. So it's going to be interesting to see if, particularly in the late game, if Isengard can sort of leverage their pikes to give them the victory. But we shall see. Several units of pikes, which is good to see. Some Bane Guards, so some even more AP. They're a little bit tankier, so probably in this case, I would say the Bane Guard are marginally the better pick, because they will be able to survive under a bit more pressure than the Uruk-hai Reavers, but even so, they're still not going to be as effective as they would be against like a Gondor or an Arthedain or something like that. Half-Orc Spear Guard, obviously Spear Malice is not going to be great at dealing with the enemies against them, but Shield Wall, trying to mass push in there, it's something that Isengard can't really do to the same extent that the other factions can. But the Half-Orc Spear Guard do allow them to at least attempt a mass push, which could be the way to go against two not so heavyweight factions in Rohan and Mirkwood. And then further towards the back we have some Guards of Orthanc in and amongst these units, very, very tough and tanky spears, so they don't do their killing particularly quickly, of course, but they are going to be very difficult to wear down. AP will be useful against them, and overall any of the elites from Mirkwood will be able to outperform them. But as long as they sit in the middle of the highly numerous Isengard forces, they will do the job that the Isengard player will undoubtedly want them to do. There are also some officers in there, but I don't think there's actually any Nazkai as such. But there are crossbows. Crossbows, of course, are a must-bring for Isengard pretty much in every battle, but especially in one like this. Because if you can get them into a position, especially onto one of Helm's Deep's walls, and start using the defensive fortifications in your favour as the attacker, it can be impossible really to come back from that, so the defenders really need to keep the crossbows away from any of the really dangerous positions. Then, further back over here we have Beast Mode on 70, so we'll see if he's brought any different units. He's got some Bane Guard as well, so a lot of high attack units that don't have shields, or at least not a significant shield value. Obviously some of the Bane Guard do wear shields on their back, but that's not really to the same extent that a unit of line infantry or spears will have shields. So against particularly the Mirkwood archers, units like this are obviously going to be fairly exposed, especially the Reavers, because they're even more lightly armoured and don't have any sort of shield value whatsoever. So against the Elven arrows, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. They've even actually gone for the Dunlending Berserkers, so a ton of shock infantry actually. They've got the armour upgrade as well, which for the Dunlenders, an armour upgrade constitutes just wearing a helmet into battle and little else. Those bilateral axes that the Dunlending Berserkers have, of course, will offer relatively similar results in melee. as the other shock infantry that Isengard have. But they do have an anti-cav bonus, so if Rohan do have any cavalry they were going to sally out, the Dunlanders will be a little bit better at dealing with them. As of course will the Dunlanding clansmen. Of course they're still militia spears, so a big charge from knights will still do horrendous damage to them. But if they can catch cavalry in melee, they will do slightly more damage than your average unit of spear militia, which isn't to be taken lightly. Some more Guards of Orthanc, we have some more crossbows, of course, good for the same reason. Also punted for some Uruk-hai Berserkers, so a massive shock infantry presence from this central army. If he charges in first and doesn't hold back, that could actually be a bad thing for his team, because his army will be much more easily dealt with by any of the archers on the defence, even the Rohirrim archers, who aren't particularly amazing. They're more sort of focused on horse archers, but even the Rohirrim foot archers will have a good day against this army. The Uruk-hai Berserkers at least have multiple HP, of course, but as soon as they're gone, they will start to drop like flies. But while those hit points are up, they will be very damaging. And then also some Uruk-hai pikemen back here, and then there's another unit way back from the army, and it is the Lurtz hunting pack, so rangers, body-piercing projectiles. Again, they're only really going to be a major problem for the defenders if they allow them to get onto one of the walls and start using it against the defenders in a similar way to the crossbows will be. The Lurtz hunting pack at the very least are pretty strong in melee as well. They can definitely hold their own against most challengers, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the attackers can get these units into a good position. And there are also some Warg Riders on the other side as well, so again, it doesn't hurt to bring the odd unit of Wargs in this sort of situation, because Rohan could very well sally out, and just having some Wargs in the back pocket to try and punish them for that is never a bad thing. Then, back over here we have Y2K86, a player who has got plenty of experience in the game, so he should be able to direct his team adequately. And he's got some Uruk-hai infantry as well, which is a good choice. Interestingly enough, the Central Army didn't have any Uruk-hai infantry, which may come back to bite them, but yeah, Uruk-hai infantry, obviously good armour, good shields, will be able to withstand arrow fire much better than the shock infantry. Got a couple of units here of Snaga skirmishers, always a good choice when you're on the attack. They're not very expensive, they can do a decent amount of damage as well if they get into the right position, and they're a little bit more, they can throw their javelins over certain units, so they won't be in the same situation as the crossbows or any of the archers that Isengard have brought today. You know, they can be used in, you know, they can be pushed up with the infantry and they can just sort of throw their javelins over their friendly troops into the defending lines. So not a bad choice, because obviously it does save a little bit of money, and obviously it still gives you a bit of a range presence as well. Guards of Orthanc once again. He's gone for some Uruk-hai Raiders, which I actually do agree with. Like, in terms of quality, obviously they're significantly worse than the Uruk-hai infantry that they fight alongside. You know, leather armor instead of the plate, and overall, you know, their weapons just aren't of the same quality. Stats aren't as good, but they are more numerous, and in this situation when you're going to be going into a real meat grinder, especially against like Mirkwood with their quality at melee and at range, like, you need to have the numbers on your side, and the Uruk-hai Raiders can provide that. And honestly, against some of the lower tier Rohan units, the Uruk-hai Raiders won't perform too badly. So to be honest, I'm surprised actually that they haven't gone for more of these. Obviously the shields as well means they'll be slightly more resilient to the Elven arrows also. More Dunlanding Berserkers, probably punted for these guys because, again, not a bad choice, because if Rohan do sally out, a unit like this can make life a little bit more tricky for them. So I'm not too surprised to see them go for them over the Bane Guard and the Reavers. Dunlanding Veterans as well, similar to the Uruk-hai Raiders in many ways, only, you know, slightly less men in the unit. Very slightly more expensive as well, I think. And also, you know, the Dunlanding Veterans have got that anti-cavalry bonus as well. But overall, maybe a little bit more attack focus with those hand axes as well. But the Raiders are probably better at being cannon fodder, but the Dunlanding Veterans have got a little bit more to them if you want to use those little unique tidbits that Dunlanders provide. Some more clansmen as well. We have some berserkers. We actually have a fire of Orthanc as well, which is interesting. So I'm going to try and smash through the wall, the lower wall anyway, with the black powder cart. We'll see if that comes off or if they get shot on the approach. 2 units of Uruk-hai Reavers. We have some more Uruk-hai crossbows and another unit of Lurtz hunting pack actually. So not insubstantial amount of ranged power that Isengard are bringing to the field today. Now onto the defence, and the higher keep looks as though it's going to be looked after primarily by Mirkwood, played by Scipone, and he has got some Hiripang up on the walls without the armour upgrade, but they don't really need the armour upgrade in this sort of situation. Indeed, if Isengard are going to try and skirmish with Mirkwood, it's rarely going to go well for the Uruk-hai archers, armour upgrade or no, and if they skirmish with the Uruk-hai crossbows, the armour upgrade isn't going to make a difference to the stopping power the crossbows provide. So the Hiripang, obviously heavy elven archer, is going to be very, very good at massacring their way through, especially the shock infantry. The main contingent of the Mirkwood army made up of Hiri Auth, spears of Emin Dewir, and that's kind of it. There's some Blades of Emondwyr in here as well, some Hyriek. So good mix of spears. There's also some Elder Council in there. So javelins, spears, infantry, all the good stuff going to be sort of trying to hold the line from the off. Woodland Realm Patrol up on the walls, not as strong as the Hiri Peng, of course, but it doesn't really matter in this situation. Mirkwood, far and away the strongest archer faction on display today. Hiri Peng back here, and then in the town centre I imagine we're going to see some more serious units. Hiri Lung, the Ents are on display. Should be interesting. Actually, you know, with all the shock infantry Isengard have, the Ents might not have actually been the best of choices, because if they charge into all that shock infantry, they will take a fair amount of damage, it must be said. Elders of the Elven King with their Silverthorn arrows, and then finally, of course, the mighty Elven King's Palace Guard. It's very rare to see a unit that's quite as devastating as they are in melee. And then finally, Darkwold44, who sent me the battle replay, big thank you to him. I did actually get sent a couple of Helm's Deep replays, but this one, because it was themed, I wanted to use it. So Rohan, obviously, civilians on the wall, they're just going to be there as a bit of a buffer for the more important units. The primary army down here, I really like the look of Rohan, you know, the style is obviously very appealing. And Rohan, you don't see them an awful lot because most battles they're in either go heavily in favour of Rohan or heavily against them. They're very much an all or nothing kind of faction, especially on an open field where they bring a lot of cavalry, because either they'll charge into the enemy, do a lot of damage very quickly and crush them, or they'll charge into the enemy, not do enough damage, and then their army starts to fall apart. That's how it often goes on the field when Rohan bring a lot of cav, but in this sort of situation it'll be interesting to see how their infantry holds up to Isengard. The Westmark infantry, honestly, kind of similar in many ways to the Uruk-hai infantry in terms of what they offer Rohan. They don't have quite the same numbers around them, which often means that they don't maybe perform quite as well and their armour isn't quite as good, but they do a little bit more damage, I think, in melee. They're definitely, I think maybe the most similar units compared them to would maybe be Harad's Serpent Guard. Yeah, a good unit, I think, underrated, but then we don't see Rohan all that much, so maybe not too surprising. Westmark Marshals, definitely one of the sort of important units in Rohan's army, because higher end shock infantry, very, very powerful axemen. They're maybe not quite as efficient as something like the Balakath Axe Guard from Umbar, because they do have what axemen generally have, which is a lower melee defense. But against a faction that does tend to pack on the armor like Isengard, they should be efficient in this case. More infantry. The Medicel Guard, really, really effective unit. This obviously one of the best javelin men in the game, and they combine this by being a very strong unit of bodyguard tier line infantry as well. Very, very good multifaceted unit, and I'm a big fan of the Medicel Guard, honestly. We have some Riddermark archers back here. There's actually some elves down here as well in the Woodland Realm Patrol. The Riddermark archers, of course, are very low-end archers, but in this sort of situation where Isengard aren't likely to skirmish back, they're pretty free to do as much damage as they possibly can to the attackers as they move forwards. Riddermark axemen, of course, just the standard axes from Rohan. It's kind of similar to, in many ways, like the unupgraded axemen of Lasarnak from Gondor, in the way that their armor values maybe aren't the best, but you know, they are capable of doing a lot of damage very quickly, and of course that AP sort of shock mentality is what Rohan are sort of built around in many ways. So, you know, a very important unit. There's some dead units over here, but that's just kind of what happens on Helm's Deep sometimes. Some units just sort of drop dead at the start of the battle. That was one of the problems with the old Helm's Deep and why they upgraded it to the newer one, but we are of course back in the old times for the moment. Helmingas, obviously the stronger of the Rohan foot archers. They're fairly capable in melee as well. They're sort of like a step below units like the Bardian Marksman and the Balakath Marksman. They're not quite as good as that, but you know, it's fairly decent company to be keeping, to be honest with you. Maybe quite similar to the nomadic infantry from Khand. They do have a shield value. They're decent in melee, able of dealing a decent amount of damage at range as well. They're not anything too special, especially not for Rohan's best foot archer, but they'll get the job done in this situation, I think. Eastmark Axemen to pad out the line, a unit of line infantry, which of course are nowhere near as good as the Westmark infantry that are in front of them. Fairly similar to the Dunlending veterans in terms of their stats, to be honest with you, only they don't have that additional anti-cavalry bonus. But still, again, in this situation, they'll be just fine for what they want. Westmark Spears, good for holding the line. Very powerful unit of Spears, actually. Good in terms of what they offer as well. And I think that's pretty much it. Interestingly enough, I'm not seeing any Shield Maidens, which is a sin, surely. Surely Darkwolf has brought at least one unit of Shield Maidens, but I'm not seeing any. That's crazy. Shield Maidens are usually such a good unit as well. Regardless, I'll make a cut here because I don't think Beast Mode on 70 is going to charge right towards the wall. At least Y2K will probably advise him not to, especially with the Black Powder Mine. So yeah, I'll make a cut and I'll rejoin when Isengard are approaching the fort. Well, an interesting little counter-attack is how we're going to start off this battle by the looks of things, as Rohan send their civilians forward to stop The Dunlending clansmen pushing up their ram to the gate unopposed, obviously not wanting to waste any of their valuable arrows on a unit of lowly Dunlending clansmen. They're going to try to deal with them in melee, and considering the fact there aren't really any reinforcements nearby, it is going to be a straight up fight, although this is a fight you would kind of expect the Dunlending clansmen to win, because they are at least fighting men, as opposed to civilians which are farmers who have their shovels and pitchforks in hand. Having said that, looks as though the terrain advantage and the downhill charge has given the civilians a bit of a leg up over the Dunlending clansmen, but the numbers still very much favour the Dunlenders here, and you'd imagine over time they would start to have more of an impact on the fight. You can see Isengard starting to get into position and thinking about moving there, but I would imagine as well that Isengard for the most part are waiting for Y2K to arrive on the scene, and they're probably going to be waiting for the black powder mine, although I'm not sure what they're actually going to do with the black powder mine. It's taking a very wide berth over here, and it's going to take them quite a while, I think, to push that towards the walls. I'm not sure what else they could really use it for, so probably does need to move forward with the rest of the army, but of course it can't afford to go off too close to the Isengard forces, otherwise there's going to be a fair amount of friendly fire there. But as we can see, slowly but surely the Dunlending clansmen gaining the upper hand in this fight, and ultimately this is maybe not the sort of engagement that the defenders would have wanted, because obviously you don't really want to be feeding kills like this into a unit as cheap as the Dunlending clansmen for the attackers, and they of course will then be able to continue to push up the ram and smash down the gate anyway. And ultimately the Dunlending clansmen would have been ripped apart very easily by the Elven infantry should they have entered the fortress anyway. But I mean, you have to ask, like, the civilians probably wouldn't have been able to do much of anything against the rest of the Isengard army anyway, so I suppose you may as well send them in to try and inflict some damage on the lowest tier unit that Isengard will have brought to the field today. Obviously civilians very, very cheap. So far all is quiet elsewhere. Still this one unit of wargs, and of course Rohan don't have any cavalry either on the defence, so it's very interesting, sort of more of a traditional defensive army from Rohan, not deciding to sally out. We've seen several times on Helm's Deep when Rohan have sort of been on the defence that they have sallied out with several cavalry units to mixed success, we shall say, but it definitely forces the attackers into an uncomfortable position early on, because obviously the attackers now they have all the time in the world to set up in a nice neat fashion. Whereas if Rohan were running around with cavalry, that really isn't the case. Even if it ends up not working out for Rohan, it can make life very awkward for defenders. Meanwhile, civilians still fighting on. Victory is a distinct possibility. I mean, to be fair, the civilians have taken a decent chunk out of the Dunlenders here, but ultimately this is a fight which is going to go in Isengard's favour. This was only ever a unit of cannon fodder to push up the ram anyway, so Isengard won't really mind this. And yeah, I'd say the attackers probably get the better end of this engagement just about. It's not really terribly important in the grand scheme of things, but every little helps, and the defenders can't afford too many things to go against them in this fight. And it does look as though Isengard are going to be moving forward, getting a little bit closer. How will... I mean, it's going to... Archers are obviously going to be key in this sort of fight. Mirkwood and Rohan should both be able to use their archers to really good effect against Isengard in this situation, and if they don't, they're in real trouble. But based on the compositions, like, there's so much shock infantry on display for Isengard here that there's so many good targets for the archers to go after, that it should be a good time for them. We'll see though. It's always going to be difficult when you're outnumbered as the defenders to try and make up that difference, especially against a faction which isn't, you know, too bad in terms of their own quality. Like Isengard, of all the orcs, are probably the most professional looking army, so it's going to be quite difficult to smash them up in the same way that you would be able to maybe for a more numbers focused Mordor army or the Misty Mountains or someone like that. Dunlenders though now going to destroy the civilians. By the looks of things, they're shaken, but the civilians have held their ground longer than perhaps they normally would, which is something to their credit. Weird hooked spears that the Dunlenders have. I do like them. Sort of very shoddy ringmail and furs that they wear as well. Meanwhile, still not a lot of movement elsewhere. What's happening with the mine? The mine is going right around the perimeter here, taking an awfully long time, because I imagine that's probably what they're doing. Like, Y2K is probably letting Isengard know that he's going to send up the mine first and foremost. There go the civilians. And the Dunlanders, are they going to push in? Nope, they're going to remount the ram, which is good to see. The civilians, of course, will route all the way back to the town centre, but it's highly unlikely that 15 civilians will be the difference between victory and defeat later on. It could be, though. We've seen margins that are that close in the past, and maybe this battle is such a one. So far, though, the gate is noticeably open, so the ram might not even be entirely necessary. Very strange indeed. Meanwhile, I think this is what we're waiting for. Before the battle gets truly underway, I think we're waiting for these berserkers to push this up. What is like these little sticks that are sort of hovering in front of them? One has to wonder what that is. Let's see here. We're under attack, are we? Ah, the Lurtz Hunting Pack. I think this was a unit that I actually missed. No, it's not. It's Y2K's Lurtz Hunting Pack. So he's getting into position with his unit of bodyguard tier rangers, trying to do some damage into the interior of Helm's Deep, but no real damage done. And they don't really have the angle. Like, it's all well and good to try and put a little bit of pressure, maybe make the defenders feel a little bit uncomfortable. But ultimately, there's not really any good targets with the angle that he can shoot at here. So Rohan don't need to worry too much at this point in time. Plenty of AP in the Rohan army as well, so Axemen versus Axemen here for the most part. The Lurtz Hunting Pack getting a little bit closer now. What are they going to try and fire at now? Yeah, they're firing right up into the air, which isn't ideal for a unit of rangers. They are going after... What are they going after? It's a wide spread they're hitting. They're hitting Eastmark Axemen and Westmark Spearmen, but yeah, probably not the best. Lurtz Hunting Pack, they could be so useful in the late game that it's probably not worth utilising them just yet. Beast mode on 70 moving forward. And they reappear once again. The other unit of Hunting Pack coming forward. I mean, this is kind of the issue with not having any cavalry from a Rohan perspective here, because it does, of course, allow the attackers to dictate the pace of the battle on their terms before they really start to move in. But having said that, Rohan really shouldn't be all that concerned with this kind of arrow fire coming in, especially if they're going after units like Eastmark Axemen, to be honest with you. It's really not the kind of unit they should mind losing, and obviously absorbing some of that potentially really dangerous ranger ammunition is going to be more important for them. Where's the black powder mine? Surely it's moving forward now. There we go. Now we're getting towards the sharper end of this engagement. I mean, if they go for this section of wall, they will knock over their own rangers, but probably not kill them. It's a fairly wide blast radius that it does have. What have we got going on over here? Now the civilians have returned from routing, and they're going to charge into the Dunlanding clansmen, who were actually in Skiltron formation. Skiltron was a formation that seemed to be far more prevalent in 3rd Age Vanilla. It's certainly not as common now in Reforged. Only really a few lowly units have got Skiltron. But obviously no danger there to the civilians. Or to the Dunlanding clansmen from the civilians, I should say. Right, and now Rohan are going to pull back, so obviously try and get away from the wall, make sure they don't take any unnecessary damage from the inevitable blast which is going to come forth. Yeah, they're going to clear the way. This will, of course, allow, when all these units do back up, if there are infantry on hand ready to rush in, could be a little bit interesting. Westmark infantry getting a little bit close there. It is a large Rohan army, though, to be fair. Offsets quite nicely against the, obviously, the inevitably more quality-focused Elven army. Right, come on, Fire of Orthanc. You can do it. Yep, in typical Medieval 2 siege weapon fashion, it's spinning on the spot. Right, come on. I'm running out of things to say here. I really need this bomb to go off so that the attack can actually get underway. Oh, come on, what are you doing? Why are you backing up from that section? Are we really going to play a game of cat and mouse where they sort of put the bomb backwards and forwards on the wall? That would be a truly excruciating thing to watch. Just blast a hole in the wall and move forward. For crying out loud. Making a real meal of this, isn't he? Here we go. This is surely going to be it. Any second now. It's going to blow up, I know it. Any time now. Jesus Christ, come on, man. I know that the siege weaponry in Medieval 2 can be a bit finicky, but this is a bit too much. Painful to watch. I'm certainly in favour of the defenders winning after this. It's only a matter of time now. It's going to blow up. Nope. Well, it's a good thing I did move to times 6 speed, because this truly is one of the worst performances I've seen at sort of controlling a unit. Here we go. This time it's going to explode. Surely now. There we go. About bloody time too. And now we can get back to regular scheduled viewing. So the entirety of the crew obviously blowing themselves up in the process, but now there is a hole in the wall. I'm not sure whether that whole rigmarole was truly worth it. Still, now the battle can truly begin, one would hope. As Isengard can start to push in, the Lurtz hunting pack continuing to try and bombard this position. To be fair, they actually have a better shot now because Rohan did have to pull back because of the black powder bomb. So, possibly a good thing there. Eastmark spearmen charging forward. What are they trying to do here? They're going to use their javelins. They're going to throw their javelins at the Lurtz hunting pack as well, but again, like the javelins on the Eastmark spearmen are honestly not that high quality. Like, it's the sort of damage you'd expect to see from a unit like Snaga skirmishers or Orc javelins. And then obviously in melee they're pretty poor as well. Like, honestly, like on paper, a unit of militia spears that has javelins as well that only cost 300 florins, they sound brilliant, but in practice they're not actually that great in my opinion. But it's better than nothing. It does still offer you a ranged attack, which can make life a little bit more tricky as the Eastmark spearmen move back in. It's been a real game of cat and mouse so far. Like, I think now the attackers just need to sort of, now that the gimmick is over with, they need to just sort of move forward and start attacking the settlement en masse rather than sort of imming and ahhing, going in and out and sort of trying to bait the defenders into doing sort of little mini mistakes, because it's never really a particularly entertaining viewing experience when that's how the attackers want to play it. Even if it's technically speaking the smart thing to do, it's never something that's all that enjoyable, to be honest. Mirkwood, of course, over here looking very, very secure in their position. But we're going to be seeing much more action down here in the lower section of the fortress first and foremost, I think, because I think if you ask most people who they'd want to attack into more, it would be Rohan over Mirkwood, certainly. Mirkwood with their really high melee defense units and melee attack units, backed up by their really strong archer line. It's not a very appealing prospect, it must be said. Forward comes all of the Isengard shock troops, however, which will try to get up onto the walls, inevitably. Rohan need to contest the walls, honestly. Like, if they allow Isengard to take the walls unopposed, Isengard are just going to put their crossbows up there and then rain hell down upon them. Which is not ideal from their perspective, certainly not. But I'm not entirely sure what Rohan are doing here, to be honest with you. Like, they really are just allowing Isengard free reign so far, which is, if you're going to do that, you may as well just retreat back to the main keep, to be honest with you. They're getting up there now, but dragging their heels a little bit, and if Isengard were just a little bit quicker, they could have got up onto the walls before Rohan had any sort of chance to respond, to be honest with you. Again, Snaga skirmishers throwing their javelins, but they are actually getting through the gap there. I thought they were throwing most of their javelins up into the air for a second then, and then... Right, come on, Rohan, what are you doing? Basic unit control seems to have gone missing in this battle so far. I'm not entirely sure what everyone's doing, but Riddermark Axemen at the very least are going to get up onto the walls. They're going to stop the advance of the Dunlending Berserkers, and in this fight I would back the Riddermark Axemen, honestly. If only just. I mean, the AP from both of these units is not going to come in particularly handy, to be honest with you. Even with the armour upgrade, I say, in inverted commas, that the Dunlending Berserkers have. Axe to axe. Uruk-hai Reavers able to get onto the walls now. The fire arrows being spilt forth from the Woodland Realm Patrol as well. But it's good to at least see that the battle has now got underway. Both sides will now no longer be able to beat about the bush, and we will be able to see some genuine action. Riddermark Axemen and Dunlanding Berserkers facing off against one another. Obviously the Dunlanders. Victory is a distinct possibility for both sides. Balance of forces evenly matched. I mean, to be fair, this unit of Riddermark Axemen is taking damage from 2 units. The Bane Guard are now up here. The AP will be slightly more useful against the Bane Guard, but the Bane Guard are also a better unit overall than the Dunlanders are anyway, so kind of balances out in that respect, I suppose. These Reavers are still here. Meanwhile, the Riddermark Axemen, for some reason, once again are retreating from the walls for reasons I'm not entirely sure of. And that will, of course, give Isengard a bit of a gap that they could potentially get their crossbows on the wall. That's never something you want to give Isengard the ability to do, because otherwise this entire lower defence will crumble before it's even really got a chance to set itself. Uruk-hai Reavers charging into the side of this one unit of Riddermark Axemen again. Yeah, these Riddermark Axemen, they need some reinforcements. Unfortunately, they're going to get that. There's also some more Riddermark Axemen over here, so more of the Rohirrim on the way. Arrows being fired in to the Dunlanders, the Woodland Realm Patrol doing their thing. Helm and Gus as well, starting to fire. What are they firing at though? Yeah, they're firing at something on the wall, which is good. I mean, all of this shock infantry is fairly exposed at this point. Dunlanding Berserk is taking a lot of damage very, very quickly. One of them getting frazzled there. Victory seems certain for the Riddermark Axemen now, but I still maintain, I mean, Isengard have got the opportunity here to really set themselves up. I think they also need to start attacking through this choke point here, to be honest with you. They need to put the pressure on in as many places as they possibly can. Because I don't think, I think if you really sort of came forward really in a robust way, Isengard, I don't think Rohan would withstand it. I don't know, I just don't like the look of this defence. It's all a little bit all over the place. I don't think it's, based on what I've seen so far, I don't think it would be all that quick to respond to big pressure. And then, of course, Isengard can really seize the momentum in this fight and maybe carry it all the way to the late game. But, I mean, it's still early days in this fight. You know, the initial engagements are only really starting now. I mean, I can't really count the Dunlanding clansmen against the civilians on the way up to the central keep. But there's more clansmen on the way forward. Isengard continuing to put pressure on. Once again, you know, these Uruk-hai Reavers going the wrong way. We've seen this several times in this fight at this point. Units going the wrong way. I really don't understand. There must be pathfinding issues around this wall, because there's no way that the players would actively choose to do these things. A whole cluster of Reavers just falling off the siege tower there, being engaged by the Riddermark Axemen, and now the Reavers are going to come back and engage the Rohirrim en masse. Once again, axe to axe. Still no assault seems to be forthcoming down here. Isengard seem far more content to just sort of play tag with the Eastmark Spearmen, which isn't really going to be too effective one way or the other. Meanwhile, another force starting to head up the slope towards the central keep now. The Dunlanding clansmen will remount that ram, I would imagine, and try and smash their way through the main gate. And up here, the elves sort of shouting their battle cries. But only one archer unit so far is actually firing. Riddermark Axemen getting back into a more defensive position. Again, the Riddermark Axemen actually counter-attacking through the siege tower at this point. And that's obviously not going to be so great for the Dunlanding clansmen. It's not really the sort of fight they would want anyway, but the high attack Axemen, the AP or no, when you're up against a unit that's that poor in terms of quality, you know what the outcome's going to be. Riddermark Axemen piling forwards. Some Isengard forces trying to sort of mount this wall as well, but Rohan quick on the draw this time, and the Eastmark Axemen are going to stop them. And again, it's two very similar units going up against one another really, in the Dunlanding Veterans and the Eastmark Axemen. Dunlanding Veterans, though, the anti-cavalry bonus is something they definitely have in their favour, but obviously that's not going to be important here. But they also have slightly more units, or slightly more men in the unit. It's not that much though. So a very even fight indeed. But Isengard will take even fights. They've got far more manpower to burn in this battle over the long haul. Snaga skirmishers moving forward now. Some of the Dunland veterans actually sort of getting all the way down here. before being skewered by some of the Westmark spearmen. Eastmark spearmen being engaged by the Snaga as they swarm forward. The Snaga do need sort of a second wave to follow them in afterwards, so it's all well and good sending a unit of trash to sort of take the brunt of the defenders' fury initially, but you need to follow them in with something, otherwise you're just sending them to their doom for no good reason. I suppose the Eastmark spearmen aren't brilliant in melee, but the Snaga skirmishers are very likely to rout without any sort of support. Forward come the Westmark Marshals. This is a little bit more like it from Rohan, sending a unit of quality up onto the walls to say to Isengard, listen, if you want to sort of take these walls, you're going to have to send forward a lot more than you're currently doing. And this is the sort of move which, honestly, if Isengard don't respond to adequately, you know, could colour the rest of this battle, to be honest with you. Meanwhile, the Elves once again counter-attacking with the Blades of Emenduir, which of course are going to be far stronger than the Dunlending clansmen in melee. We've got some Snaga moving up, we've got several units of pikes, which is a bold move this early on, but to be fair, I mean, here in this well, no, actually, you really don't want to put your pikes in here because the Elven archers will simply turn around and start bombarding you. As strong as pikes can be in melee with Mirkwood and really sort of make up the difference in terms of quality, you don't want to send them in this early, I think. They could be such an effective tool in this battle as well, if they wait a little bit longer. Meanwhile, the clansmen, through sheer numbers, have actually managed to force the Riddermark Axemen back. But they're not really going to be able to make too much in the way of progress, to be honest with you. Like I said, Isengard, with Westmark Marshals shown to be willing to move up onto the walls, they're going to need something of a little bit more quality, or they're going to need to attack in more places than they currently are. They're going to need to put on a much, much bigger push through here. Like, just a single unit of Snaga skirmishers is weak, to be honest with you. They need to send forward more. They need to show a little bit more courage here in the face of this defence, because if the battle continues to go like this, the defenders will continue to be comfortable, Isengard will never be able to seize the initiative, and that will be how the battle ends. Victory almost a certainty. Eastmark Axemen at this point, the Uruk-hai Reavers, backs to the walls. Their AP isn't going to be all that useful against the Eastmark Axemen. Numbers obviously a huge factor, like the Eastmark Axemen aren't that good, but numbers wise is going to be the problem. Riddermark Axemen, the Uruk-hai Reavers, of course they're going to rout and they're going to get shredded on the retreat. Woodland Realm Patrol and Westmark Marshals coming back onto the walls as the Uruk-hai Reavers, only a few of them are going to be able to retreat back down the ladders, the rest of them are going to be cut to pieces. More Dunlending veterans attacking the walls now. A few javelins flying back and forth, but the really telling thing here so far is that the defenders haven't had to use a huge amount of their arrows, and they've still been very comfortable, to be honest with you. And again, this is going to be another poor decision, I think, from the attackers. Like, they're trying to make something happen, and I appreciate that, but this is not where you want to be doing this. Like, there's Elder Council throwing their javelins in, there's several units of Elven arrows being launched in there. Are they Greenwood Rangers? Because I don't want to zoom in on that if they're Greenwood Rangers, because that will definitely crash the game. But I don't think there is, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's a perfect shot, and the javelins in particular are going to be very nice in this situation, because the Uruk-hai pikes, of course, with those javelins, and that's a disastrous assault from Isengard. And Y2K86 honestly should know better than that. Like, the other two players, you know, newer, not really. I've seen both of them before, but not all that often. Y2K, I've seen him several times. He really should know better than that. Like, he should be able to coordinate the assault to be a lot more effective than that. But at the very least, Isengard are now moving in. They're putting in a little bit more pressure. And they do need to. They need to send forward more than this, though. Overwhelming force through this choke point at this point is the only way I think Isengard can turn this fight back around. Because, yeah, there's some decent quality units on this front line. You know, the Westmark Spearmen and the Westmark Infantry are no pushovers. But if you come forward in force, push them out the way, you can then start to flood in and start to take the lower fortress, which Isengard need to. They can afford to burn more manpower than the defenders can, certainly, but it's not been a particularly good first phase of the battle for them. And they definitely need to turn things around as this fight goes along. Yeah. Westmark Marshals plodding their way forwards as well. There are at least some Uruk-hai infantry moving in. Again, though, it's possible that newer players like this aren't really familiar with sort of force pathing your units through, getting into shield wall, trying to mass push. And at this point, the window of opportunity is kind of closing. There's Westmark Marshals on the way forward, Westmark Spears. Rohan pretty much committing everything forward, sort of feeling very confident in their position. Like, Isengard aren't going to be able to get through. If we just commit everything up front, keep our defences solid, Isengard aren't going to be able to get through. And he's quite right in that assessment, Dark Wolf 44. Isengard have kind of made their bed so far in this battle, and they're being made to lie in it. Elven Realm Patroller here. Still these Dunlending clansmen who are stuck on the siege tower. I can't help but feel like some of these pathing issues are probably due to the fact we're on an older version of Helm's Deep because it's technically broken. Yeah, that was an absolutely horrendous assault from Isengard. And to be fair, they should have seen that coming. Like Helm's Deep, what you really want to be doing is trying to take the lower fortress first. You only really want to push forward here if A, the defenders haven't really sort of banked themselves up properly, which Mirkwood here, they've got far too many units. And then you sort of wait to attack up here when you're also attacking from this side as well. Because you can attack up the wall and get onto this wall here, you can go through the archway, you can go through the main gate then, and you're pressuring from several positions, whereas over there they're only pushing from one angle, and of course when Mirkwood have one choke point to focus on with their infantry and their archers, it's going to end in tears for Isengard. Rohan's damage-focused infantry has also performed very well as well, like the Axemen, both one-handed and two-handed, have done well against the Isengard assault so far. Isengard have kind of played into their hands a little bit by sending forward, you know, the structure of their assault. It's one of those times where I can't really explain it adequately, I think, but the structure of Isengard's assault has not been good. And you can see here Isengard they are trying to push forward now, to be fair, but this is the sort of thing that should have happened far, far sooner. You know, sort of using their Snarger skirmishers to kill off like 30 or so Eastmark spearmen was never going to be a big deciding factor in this fight, and yet they decided to waste time trying to do that. And in the end, that may be a big difference maker here. Riddermark Axemen in reserve. Combination of Helmengas and Riddermark archers now opening up, so most of the Rohirrim archers at this point are starting to dump their ammo into Isengard as they move forward, trying to do as much damage as they possibly can, which is good to see. More Rohirrim reinforcements, the Riddermark Axemen. Now the defences on the walls are looking a little bit more thin on the ground, but again Isengard, they don't have the men close enough by to take advantage of that. Like, they're lagging too far away. Like, yes, you'd be in the range of archers, but the archers would have to shoot over the walls and siege towers to hit your units, and against units like Uruk-hai infantry with their armour and shields, that's not going to be too big of a deal, to be honest with you. What have we got going on over here? Yeah, see, over here, using the Snarger skirmishers to soften up the line is something I would have done, because there's not really anything else you can do while the archers are still there. Like, you can see there that Y2K sending his Uruk-hai raiders in, that was only ever going to end in one way, and again, I'm very surprised that Y2K is doing this. Like, he's a player that really should know better than this. Abysmal, to be honest with you. Isengard so far. I mean, Isengard so far don't deserve to win this battle if they do go on to win it. But I mean, Isengard as the attackers, like I said, they do have more margin for error. It's a real sign of the times when the Westmark Marshals are the ones that are climbing up the ladder into their own fortress, having counter-attacked. That was maybe a little bit too gung-ho though, because the Uruk-hai Berserkers were there and waiting. And there are a few Uruk-hai Berserkers on the walls as well. So something with a little bit more punch is going to be needed to stop the Uruk-hai Berserkers at the very least, but there's some Elder Council down here as well. Mirkwood feeling confident enough to send some reinforcements down here, and why not? There's no danger they're going to lose the fight at the main gate. Whereas down here, eventually Rohan's manpower should start to falter, and Isengard should at least win, but it's going to cost Isengard so much. Like, you can see the Helmengas and Riddermark archers doing a lot of damage there into the Isengard blob, and indeed there's a lot of routing going on now, which is definitely not good. I mean, there's still a fairly long way to go in this fight, and again, Isengard do still have reserves, but based on what I've seen so far, I can't really see Isengard recovering in this fight. I think the die has been cast. Meanwhile, over here, there's a couple of Berserkers still up here, the rest of the units still down on the lower ground. Half-Orc Baneguard moving forward, doing some damage to the Elder Council that was sent down here by Mirkwood to try and reinforce. Still these Dunlending clansmen, I assume they must be stuck, and I assume this is a pathfinding issue, which, again, older version of Helm's Deep. Really the hotfix, I'm glad to see the hotfix is now being genuinely worked on, because it really can't come soon enough. Like, some of the things that .97 did break were really unfortunate, to be honest with you. The content that it added was fantastic, but the unfortunate nature in how it broke things was not great. Meanwhile, over here, Helmengas, 55, so out of ammunition, being used now as a makeshift infantry unit. And they can perform adequately in this role, although to be fair, you know, against a full unit of Uruk-hai Reavers, you'd imagine that would probably be their demise, but they can hold them back for long enough for another Isengard blob to be given the business by yet more archers. Another unit of Riddermark Axemen that are in reserve. going to be committed to the front line, and Isengard still very much shut down, but more units coming forward now. Uruk-hai Berserkers being sent onto the walls, and they'll rip woodland round patrol limb from limb. Baneguard up there as well. What have we got going on here? Ooh. Oh, there goes the general. One of the Isengard generals, and I would assume that has to be Y2K's. Although I say that, Beast Mode's Guards of Orthanc are on the front line as well. But Mirkwood's archers, of course, give Mirkwood such a leg up in this fight. And even then, I mean, Mirkwood's infantry standing on its own is still going to be a difficult enough challenge to try and get through. Even basic units, like the blades and spears of Amenduia, are very capable in melee in comparison to similar kinds of units for a similar cost. But with the support of those Mirkwood archers up on the wall with perfect shots and javelins, of course, Isengard never really stood a chance over here, which is why I'm quite surprised Isengard approached this fight down here in the way that they did. Regardless, still more shooting those arrows up into the air, so a bit of waste now from Mirkwood, but to be honest with you, Mirkwood's archers have already certainly paid for themselves in this fight. Uruk-hai Berserkers, are they getting shot? They probably should be. Medicel Guard and Riddermark archers should be trying to focus them down, but again, Isengard losing their bottle a bit there. Understandably this time, but Isengard can't afford to retreat at this point. They can only go all in. They've already sort of sealed their own fate in many ways. They need to try and go all in here and try, go for the Hail Mary, make something happen, but it's been punishing for Isengard, honestly. Like, going into all of these Rohirrim axemen down here has been very, very damaging on Isengard's army. And while Rohan, they of course have got their own survivability issues, hasn't really panned out that way so far. Like, Rohan are going to take some damage now from the Uruk-hai crossbows, but I can't help but feel as though the damage has already been done. Helmingast out of ammunition now, so that's more reinforcements that can be added into the melee fight should they be required. And in come the Ents. I mean, the Ents are going to go piling in here. I mean, there are axemen in there. There are Lurt's hunting pack that are out of ammunition, but this is the sort of thing which could finish off this Isengard assault yet again when they're being backed up by all of the Rohirrim infantry. They're going to need their ranged units to do a lot of the heavy lifting for them here. It's a very strange fight, this one, because again, this has all the makings of one of those fights where towards the late game it may very well end up being quite close in terms of the percentage, but I've never felt like Isengard have gained the momentum in this fight at all. I've never felt like Isengard have looked like grabbing the bull by the horns and going on to win this fight. Uruk-hai infantry coming in. Mirkwood's front line has been very comfortable this whole match because of the archers. Rohan had been put under slightly more pressure. They've had a wider area to try and cover, and their units, of course, are not quite as survivable as Mirkwood's anyway. But they're still doing a very fine job nonetheless. Westmark infantry, it doesn't get any easier for Isengard, but Isengard do have more reinforcements. You can see there are still quite a few units outside the walls, actually, so it does go to show that Isengard still have more to give, but time will tell whether that will be enough. These Helmingast will fall now, because there's a unit of Uruk-hai Berserkers heading up onto the walls, which that's going to be very bad news for the Helmingast. As long as this time they commit to an assault, Isengard, they've been very, not cowardly as such, but they haven't really committed to anything overly, like, seeing units retreat back off the walls willingly from the attackers when they're sort of in such a rut is disappointing to see. Yeah, and with the Ents in here being backed up by more Rohirrim, there's another unit of spears, depleted unit of spears, but more infantry that can be committed forward should they need to. There's a lot more pikes being piled in as well, but pikes are really the last thing you want against Ents. Ents, of course, are very similar to trolls, and if there's one thing trolls are good at killing, it's pikemen. The Ents, of course, as well, they're pretty much like on a par, if not stronger, than units like the Olag-hai and the Trolls of the White Hand, so they're going to be able to really make their mark here on a lot of these more defensive-focused Isengard units as they move forwards. We've got here Medicel Guard, 63 of them, getting back onto the walls. Uruk-hai Berserkers continuing to swing those mighty sword axe crosses that they wield. Sort of a cross between a sword and an axe, functionally. Big war pick, perhaps. Anyway, more Mirkwood infantry pushing in. I mean, Mirkwood pretty much have just sent in their entire infantry force to block Isengard at this point. They have nothing left in the town centre. They have the Elven King's Palace Guard over here, the Elders of the Elven King. So, I mean, to be fair, the defenders don't really have anything left in reserve as such. Most of what they've got back in sort of safe positions that aren't in melee are Elven archers and the Palace Guard. So, you know, maybe Isengard will be hoping that maybe the defenders have been too aggressive. And you can see here that the answer started to fall. Finally, it does look as though Rohan's defences are going to start to fall away. The damage that has been done to Isengard has been fairly extensive, though. Medicell Guard going to try and get in position. I have to say, I mean, it's a good thing for the attackers that Rohan didn't bring their Shield Maidens, because this is the kind of situation where Shield Maidens would absolutely devastate the Isengard army. That blob would have been the perfect target for a unit of Shield Maidens. Those thrown axes would have been perfect. May not be armor-piercing damage, but against the unshielded Uruk-hai Pikemen, Uruk-hai Reavers, the Bane Guard, perfect unit to break up this assault, to be honest. But Rohan instead went for a few more units of just standard infantry, and so far they continue to hold the line, but eventually this defence now is going to fall, you would say. Even with the addition of the Helmingas, one unit of them isn't going to be enough. The Medicell Guard are there. Woodland Round Patrol are here. The Half-Orc Bane Guard continuing to fight up on the walls. Very depleted unit of Eastmark Axemen is all that stands between them and securing another foothold for Isengard to potentially push further into the settlement. And indeed there's some Berserkers as well. A scary sight indeed. There's the Ents they pulled out, actually, interestingly enough. Woodland Round Patrol. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Like, you can see one of those Silverthorn arrows whiz past, and I mean, the Elves of the Elven King do have a good shot there into the Isengard blob. They're shooting up into the air a little bit, but I mean, as long as they're hitting their marks, it shouldn't be too bad. Mirkwood actually now pushing outside the gate, which maybe is not what they wanted to do, but they really are taking the fight to Isengard once again. The combination of Reavers, Infantry and Pikemen, but the quality of Mirkwood just has been too much for Isengard to deal with over here at the main gate. A difficult fight indeed that they have had on their hands. They have reinforcements, they do. Crossbowmen, more infantry, fair amount of infantry, some raiders that have returned, clansmen. I mean, they're going to need to sort of make something happen over here sooner rather than later, Isengard, but I mean, I don't think they're going to be able to win over here, but if Isengard are going to come back into this fight, it's going to need to be over here. Woodland Round Patrol have been committed to the front line to try and shore things up. Again, Elven archers can look after themselves in melee, but I do feel as though, you know, if they're going to continue to hold this line, they're going to need something a little bit more than Woodland Round Patrol to shore things up, but we'll see. The Medicell Guard needs to start throwing their javelins, honestly. Like, there's a bit of high ground over here that you could put yourself into, and you've got the perfect thing to just throw your javelins in. You're not going to get a better shot than that. And then as soon as you're out of ammo, of course, their services will be most certainly required in melee. Very strong unit in melee, the Medicell Guard. One of Isengard got still out here. They've got some pikes. They do have some Nazkai. So they were hidden away in Dark Reaper Death's army. So that is a very significant unit to have late on. Javelins being thrown in. That should really help speed along Isengard's potential victory. But no, Isengard are shaken here. Won't take too much, I think, to maybe rout them. I mean, the Riddermark Archer is not the most damaging archer in the world, but a bit of ranged pressure could be all it takes to maybe cause Isengard to rout here, which would be a real tragedy for them after the attempts they've made to really try and make something happen. And yeah, they're routing. This assault has fallen apart. Nothing has gone Isengard's way so far in this battle. Meanwhile, Uruk-hai Berserkers are fighting something, apparently. Sort of swinging their swords in the air, but I mean, they have the opportunity here to try and put some pressure on the rear of those Rohirrim lines. Yeah, the Ents are here, but the Ents aren't really going to want to get mixed up in anything the Berserkers have to offer. Perfect unit for killing Ents, really, with the huge damage and the arm piercing they offer. Lurtz Hunting Pack moving forward in melee. But still, over here, I mean, it is very difficult for Isengard, this. Arrows thudding into the ranks of the army on both sides. Uruk-hai infantry and Reavers trying to push in from the side, maybe try and work up the lines. But yeah, I mean, all of these heavier Mirkwood units continuing to hold, and yeah, there's also some ranged support coming in now. Not particularly accurate, but that will still be the odd kill here and there, which will only cement Mirkwood's dominance on this side of the battlefield at the very least. Still those walks. If enough of a gap appears, the walks could be a real problem. There's a unit of fresh Hiri Lung up here as well. The Ents, what are they going to do? Right, what are the Medicell Guard doing? Dark Wolf has not used his Medicell Guard all that well, to be honest with you, unless all of the volleys he's had with them have happened when I looked away. I think he's actually going to retreat those now, as well as a unit of Riddermark Archers. I think he sees that this front line is now not long for this world. I mean, to be fair, it's only Snaga that are making up most of this front line, and with all that support coming from Mirkwood's Archers up on the walls. But they are going to retreat. I mean, eventually Isengard are going to get through here, so it doesn't really make too much sense to waste units like the Medicell Guard on trying to hold that line for too much longer. Uruk-hai Berserkers still alive. Hiri Lung on their way down onto the walls here. It's interesting that the Dunlending clansmen are just sort of stuck here. They're going to move forward here, the Hiri Lung. They're going to charge into the Berserkers. The Berserkers damaged though, only 36 of them left, which implies their hit points are mostly gone. I'm not sure where are the Hiri Lung going? Again, this is another example of a player who seems to have lost complete control of where his units are going. And I'm going to give the players in this game the benefit of the doubt and say that it's the map's fault rather than theirs. Meanwhile, Rohan's still trying to hold on. Another unit of pikes on the way forward, but still those Silverthorn arrows finding their marks against the Isengard army. Still doesn't fancy the chances of the defenders. I think maybe that's a bit of a defeatist attitude to have, really, because so far the defenders have... I've been more impressed with the defenders certainly than the attackers, as I'm sure it's been obvious based on my commentary, but yeah. Still continuing to win over here, even though they've pulled some units back, so I think they are sort of getting ready to defend the inner settlement. Medicell Guard and Riddermark Archers pulling back. A few units still over here. Westmark Infantry. I mean, if you're going to retreat, you may as well retreat everything. Even a unit of 38 Westmark Infantry. They're still firing away with some Riddermark Archers fairly close up. Any additional kills they can get on Isengard as they move forward will be good, but of course it's going to be the Elven arrows that do most of the really important damage. Uruk-hai Berserkers still taking losses. They will at least be able to fight back against the Hiri Lung, but the numbers discrepancy. Also, heavy swordsmen like this are not really ideal opponents for the Berserkers. High melee defense. Mirkwood not overly focused on their armor, so Berserkers like this on paper are not really well positioned to face them. Obviously their overall quality means they can, but not particularly efficient, not as efficient as it could be. Dunlending Berserkers moving in. Still more Elven arrows from on top of that wall. Hitting the Isengard ranks, but again it's only a matter of time at this point. Woodland Round Patrol victory almost a certainty. Not for much longer though. In come the Wargs. You know, the Wargs, this is, if they're going to be useful in this match, now is the time. They should have charged in sooner, to be honest with you. Try and go after some of the units that were a little bit more exposed back here, because they're not going to be useful late on. In a choke point, where there are still Palace Guard, they'll be ripped limb from limb. Meanwhile, Mirkwood's still fighting out here, mostly the Amenduia units at this point. There is a unit of Hiri Alth in there as well, and that's Hiriak. So heavy spears as well, but Isengard aren't really putting a great deal of pressure on this front line anymore. And I'm wondering if it's because they're starting to run out of manpower here, Isengard. We're into the final 10k frames, the sharp end of any battle. And Mirkwood, I think, sensing Isengard's weakness, are actually going to come back out here. Hiri Peng, heavy Elven archers in melee. They're going to charge forward. What are they going to go after here? They're going to try and go after the Snaga skirmishers, and they're going to succeed. And with such a depleted unit, they'll be very, very easy to finish off. That was a good move from Mirkwood. Make sure that Isengard cannot use any of their ranged support tools. And the Hiri Peng, of course, very capable of looking after themselves in melee. Let's see here. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Quite so. Is that more counter-attacking happening? Another unit of Blades of Emondwyr. So yeah, Mirkwood smells blood here. I think he senses that Y2K's army is sort of on its last legs. Isengard is sort of getting ready to push through this area over here, but Rohan have retreated some units. Between units like the Hirialth, the Palace Guard and the Ents, like there's also the Medicel Guard, which are going to be able to rain death down from on high. They're over there, actually. It's not a huge army the defenders have left, to be fair, but in terms of sheer quality, unless Isengard can make something happen quickly, I maintain my assessment that it's one of those battles that will probably end quite close in terms of percentage, but I've never really truly felt like Isengard were going to go on to win this fight. The die was cast fairly early on, and it's remained as such, I believe. Uruk-hai crossbowmen in melee, which again, it looks as though they still have ammunition, so I'm not entirely sure what they're doing in melee. Like, again, they're the sort of unit which can potentially rip this counter-attack to bits. All you need to do is put them down here on the low ground, shoot into the side, and Bob's your uncle, basically. And that's obvious. That's an obvious thing to do. Like, these are not people who have not played Total War at all in the past. These should be things that are obvious to do, but yeah, I've not been impressed with Isengard's play in this match, to be honest with you. I think it's been very poor. In come the Wargs. Again, I mean, Lurt's hunting back, routing. The Ents are here, obviously. The Wargs at this point, like, what else are they going to be used for? Like, I've got some sympathy here because, like, they should have been used earlier, yes, but you've got to make the most of the situation you're in. What are you going to use the Wargs for? You may as well try and just pile in, put a bit of pressure on. But they're sort of inevitably going to rout here. The Wargs were a good pick, honestly. Bringing a unit of Wargs is a good idea in a situation like this when you're dealing with Rohan on the defence, because they could sally out in a big way. So it always helps to have sort of units that to counteract that, more so than just the pikes and the crossbows, which you're going to want to use to take the settlement itself. Gives you a bit of mobility as well, but in the end, the Wargs didn't really end up doing much of anything, to be honest with you. Trying to come forward here, but again, Riddermark archers in melee, I mean, obviously they're trash, but at this point I think the defenders will be feeling quite pleased with themselves. I mean, do Isengard, they have the Nazkai, yes, but do they have the support around the Nazkai? I mean, Guards of Orthanc, Berserkers, some strong units I suppose, but they've been far too conservative with units like that. Still Elders of the Elven King as well. Over here it continues to go quite badly for Isengard, like their crossbows are still being engaged in melee. The blades and spears of Emondwyr continuing to push forward, continuing to inflict grievous wounds on Isengard's ever decreasing chances of getting something from this battle. Let's see here. 183 Uruk-hai infantry, Lurt's hunting pack. I mean, they're not. It's not impossible Isengard go on to win this fight. That's the thing. Like, I've been ripping into them this entire battle, and they could still go on to win this because that's how it works in a defense where, or assault where you have more numbers to play with. And you know, Mirkwood and Rohan especially are maybe not the sort of factions which hold themselves together too well in the situation where they start to lose their manpower. And that will be what Isengard are hoping happens here. Forward comes the Uruk-hai crossbows. They're going to try and get onto the wall. The Hiri Lang are going to block them though. I mean, 49 Hiri Lang. And they're going to try and do... No, they're just going to sit on the wall there and try and thread the needle, I think. If they were aware, these crossbows could go through this door over here and emerge up here where the Hiri Lang are, but I don't think they're going to be... I don't think they're going to notice that. I mean, even if they did that, to be fair, like a unit like this Hirialth is just going to be able to get onto the wall as well and close them down, but it would at least give the defenders something to think about. I'm amazed actually the Wargs are still fighting. I suppose there's not really any anti-cavalry units that are facing off against them, so they're still here, but for how much longer, I wonder. Let's go and see what Mirkwood's counter-attack down here is doing. And they've had enough. Done enough damage, I think. Just going to leave this one unit of Spears of Emondwyr down here to make sure Isengard can't chase them down while they are sort of moving backwards. And to be fair, this unit of crossbows in melee is still not going to be enough to defeat the Spears of Emondwyr, so Mirkwood, simply too much to offer against Isengard in this fight. So what have Isengard got left? one last final push to try and sort of go all or nothing. Berserkers, Nazkai, Guards of Orthanc, all good units. Like I said, not impossible. I mean, it's interesting, like there's still a unit over here that I think everyone has just sort of forgotten about. It looks like they still have ammunition as well, so they could start shooting into the back of the assault as it happens, and then that would be absolutely disastrous. What a weird fight it's been. Very, very weird. It's certainly not been sort of a fight where I've been particularly impressed with much of the play, to be honest. I mean, it's been interesting to behold. But I mean, Rohan and Mirkwood haven't even played all that well, to be honest. Like, they've done what they needed to. They haven't really made any glaring mistakes, but I wouldn't say they've done anything too impressive either. Isengard have just been quite lackluster in what they've done. Spears of Emendweir, at this point, they are being flooded by Uruk-hai infantry, which should finally be the end of them, and they can continue to push forward. But Mirkwood's still not allowing Isengard really into the gates, and this unit of Uruk-hai infantry will be stopped once again by some Mirkwood resistance at the top of the hill, and a counter-attack may be forthcoming once again. And again, the single unit of Uruk-hai infantry probably isn't going to be enough to force their way into the settlement fully. And the longer that Y2K continues to play in this manner, I mean, I think his fate is already sealed, to be honest with you. I really can't see him salvaging this situation, to be honest with you, even if he has a perfect game from here on. Right, what are Isengard going to do? Need to make their choice quickly. All or nothing, I think. And I think that's what it's going to be. All of the elites are coming in, they're just going to flood forwards. Everything in. Dunlending Berserkers and Y2K should probably be committed forwards as well, to be honest. Commit everything on both sides. Once again, we see units going in the wrong direction. These Berserkers should be just piling in. There's nothing to lose now. And potentially putting everything up front could be enough to unsettle the defenders. The Medicel Guard have not been used particularly well either, to be honest. I mean, it's possible they've thrown javelins, but I've not seen them this entire game, and they've just been sort of running back and forth behind the front line, never throwing their javelins at any point. Now we could finally see them do so. And they kind of need to, honestly. Because Isengard are finally pushing forward and finally maybe putting some pressure onto the defence. But the Medicel Guard are actually being engaged in melee. I mean, of course, they can look after themselves perfectly well in melee, but they would have wanted to use their javelins first. What's going on over here? Uruk-hai infantry. Yeah, again, it's been a weird battle because I've just never felt like Isengard could go on to win it. But I mean, it's still very possible they could. Like, if the defenders, like Isengard, I think have played quite poorly throughout the entire game. But if the defenders respond to this in the wrong way, they could go on to lose the battle. And one serious mistake from the defenders could be enough to completely overturn what's happened in the rest of the battle. Like this again is a completely puzzling move to me. Like, what on earth are the Elves of the Elven King doing? Saving their own necks? Why? The situation is fairly critical down here now, and they should be going in to help stop Isengard's push here, and yet they're running away. They're being retreated, essentially. And it's so frustrating to see. I really don't understand what the Mirkwood player is doing there, and it's just another example of how I think Rohan and Mirkwood haven't actually played that well. Like, they haven't done anything majorly wrong as of yet, but that could very easily change if they're not careful. Elves of the Elven King moving over here. Again, that smacks of a player wanting to preserve their most elite unit on the field, not wanting to commit them in. Which again is completely the wrong attitude to have. Meanwhile, what about the Palace Guard? At least the Palace Guard have been committed forward, thank God for that, but it might be too late, honestly. Like, the Elders were needed down here as well. Reinforcements are needed, and man, here in the late game, Isengard, after having such trouble, may be about to turn this fight around because of the defenders not responding at all properly to a push like that. That would be remarkable, honestly. The Elves of the Elven, they don't have ammunition, that's the thing. Like, if they had ammo, putting themselves here to shoot into that blob would be the right thing to do. But they don't. They've got their swords out, which to me says they have no ammunition left. They should be in melee against something. And they're not. Absolutely woeful play. Hirielth. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle, so yeah, their manpower is starting to fail them. And Isengard, in spite of all the bad stuff in this battle, it looks as though they are going to have what it takes to they're just going to have enough numbers, and also, you know, obviously relying on the defenders to make some poor decision making here in the late game. And I think that comes down to Mirkwood more than anything else. Rohan, they didn't have much left, and they did commit everything over here to try and stop Isengard's push. Mirkwood, though, have massively dropped the ball. Guards of Orthanc, very tough unit to kill, in combination with the high damage of the Uruk-hai Berserkers and the Nazkai. I think that's going to be enough, you know. I think it's going to be enough. The pikes are also here, and at this point in time, like, if you've saved a unit of pikes for the late game and there isn't any ammunition left, neither Rohan nor Mirkwood have got any phalanx units of their own to sort of match up with them, so those pikes are going to make life very difficult as well. The final phases of this fight, they're going to push towards the town centre at this point, the Dunlanding Berserkers, and that is going to force the coward that is Thranduil to commit himself. I cannot believe the Mirkwood player has done that. It is everything I despise that someone has done. I don't understand why people feel the need to sort of retreat their elite units like that. Like, what are you saving them for? This is not a campaign. You're not going to be able to carry them over to a future battle. This is a one-off. Why have you retreated them? It doesn't make any sense. And as a result, Isengard have just mushroomed through this position, and it's been a disaster. Absolute disaster. And honestly, the defenders deserve to lose based on that move alone. It overturns all of the sort of smaller mistakes that Isengard have made throughout the battle. Isengard have made some highly questionable decisions, but nothing on that level. Uruk-hai crossbows are in a position where they can fire now as well. There goes Theoden. Skewered by a guard of Orthanc, the strongest that Dunland have to offer. Taking their vengeance on Rohan. Properly this time. Crossbows being shot at point blank. Even the Palace Guard, I mean, there's still 53 of them. They haven't really taken any losses as of yet. I mean, if Mirkwood can turn this around based on the strength of their elites alone, fine. But I really don't think they deserve to. And you can see here as well, the Dunlanding Berserkers, even if the Elders of the Elven King decided to retreat this way now, they're going to have to go through the Dunlanding Berserkers first. Crossbows moving into place. The pikes are here though, that's the problem. The pikes do need support though. Like Isengard, they can't afford to just keep these elites back behind the pikemen. They need to be in with the pikes. Because if the Palace Guard manage to get into close quarters with pikemen and Dunlanding Berserkers, they're going to rip them to shreds. So they're going to need the support of Guards of Orthanc and Uruk-hai Berserkers. And the town centre is being taken. Like, that's something else which maybe hasn't been mentioned yet. Like, these Dunlanding Berserkers are just sat in the town centre, happy as you like. 1 minute 47 to go, and that is still not enough for the Mirkwood player to want to commit his Elders of the Elven King. Like, it boggles the mind. And at this point, I'm honestly not sure he's going to be able to. Like, with the Uruk-hai Berserkers, if they move to actually actively engage the Elders of the Elven King, they're not going to have enough time to take the town centre back. This is going to be a victory where the town centre is taken. That is bonkers. It's madness. That's not just shooting yourself in the foot, that's blowing your own head off. Victory seems certain for the Alert's hunting pack. They're continuing to push through here. To be fair, this is a little bit more understandable now because Mirkwood, of course, had to retreat a lot of units to try and stop this situation from happening over here, but it happened anyway. Elven King's Palace Guard getting shot by the Uruk-hai crossbows. Yeah, Isengard are going to win. For so long in this fight, it looked as though they weren't going to be able to achieve anything, Isengard. Like, they never sort of had the momentum in the early phases, but they had enough men. And Mirkwood really just threw it away in the late game. They really did. The Elders of the Elven King they're not going to be, like, they should still be able to defeat the Uruk-hai Berserkers, to be honest with you, but they're not going to be able to defeat them within 20 seconds and then get across the bridge and then kill off enough of the Dunlanding Berserkers that the balance of power flicks back in favour of Mirkwood. So Y2K, for as much as I ripped on him in the early stages of the fight, he secured victory for his team. I mean, to be fair, I think Isengard probably would have been able to win conventionally as well at this point. Their crossbows are in a dominant position. And there we go. You've got plenty to be ashamed of, the defenders. Well, maybe Rohan don't. But Mirkwood does. Like, Mirkwood, that was a shocking performance. Absolutely shocking in the late game. Like, for so long, Mirkwood was so comfortable as well, which I feel as though was probably the problem. Like, when you get that comfortable, get a little bit complacent, like, I don't think I've seen a more catastrophic misjudgment than retreating the Elders of the Elven King to the corner for no good reason. That is just madness to me. It's one of the worst, like, single plays I've seen in all the time I've been doing Reforged. And I don't want to be too harsh because the Mirkwood player is newer. I've only seen them in one battle before, but that was awful. Like, you cannot do that again. That was terrible. Like, Isengard seized the initiative then in a big way. To be fair, like, Rohan and Mirkwood, they have a very clearly defined weakness between the two of them in that they don't have phalanx units. They're two fairly lightweight factions in terms of their infantry. So sort of a more heavy-duty push from Isengard always would have been more successful. Like, again, I maintain what I say. Like, in terms of an overall quality in this battle, there wasn't an awful lot of it, to be fair. Like, I think the best player on the field probably was the Rohan player. And that wasn't because Rohan did anything too well as such. Like, I know Darkwolf sent me the replay, so I don't want to be, like, too rude, but it just didn't make any mistakes. Like, just a bog standard performance from Rohan. Everyone else made some pretty serious mistakes. I mean, to be fair, Dark Reaper Death did okay. I think Dark Reaper Death was alright. Beast Mode on 70 got a lot of kills, but there was some weirdness going on the walls. And I don't know whether the stuff that was going on the walls, like retreating, going in the wrong direction, because everyone seemed to be doing that. So I think that was more pathfinding issues than anything else. But yeah, a very strange fight. But in the end, I think the attackers deservedly won, because you cannot do that I've made no secret of the fact in the past that it really bothers me when people sort of don't commit their elites, when they want their elites to sort of be protected almost. They want to conserve them. But why? Why are you saving them? Like, what are you saving them for? It doesn't make any sense. And this, honestly, this battle was close. There wasn't a lot left on either side, and in the end it was a town centre victory. But this, more than anything, serves as a warning. Like, do not do what the Mirkwood player did here. It means doom for your team. But yeah, very weird. I mean, thanks for Darkwolf44 for sending this one to me. It was definitely a very weird one. Let's see what did the damage from Rohan, because that was impressive kills from Rohan, to be fair. Westmark Infantry doing very well in melee. Westmark Spearmen doing very well in melee. So it does go to show that the Westmark units are actually very good in terms of their quality. The Riddermark Axemen, they don't have a lot of longevity, the Riddermark Axemen, because, you know, they're obviously sort of bog standard Axemen, which does mean that, you know, with that lower melee defense, and obviously they're a little bit more vulnerable to missiles as well, means that they do tend to fizzle out a little bit more quickly. But pretty much everything getting over 100 kills. The one thing I would say Rohan did majorly wrong was the fact that Elven never really threw their javelins. Like, that was a pretty serious misplay, to be honest with you, from Rohan, but nothing quite as serious as most of the other players engaged in this fight. So Darkwolf sort of becomes the MVP by proxy, really. Westmark Marshals did okay, again, very similar to the Riddermarks. Like, they actually did slightly worse this time around, but I would imagine that's because they were focused down by sort of stronger Isengard units like the Berserkers they were in melee with at one point. Civilians, most of those kills came against Dunlanding Clansmen, so two lower tier units smashing up against one another. Archers, yeah, I mean, most of Rohan's units, short of two, broke 100 kills, which is a sign of how damaging Rohan's infantry can be. And the Eastmark Spears, you don't expect to get over 100 kills. They don't have that many javelins, and in melee they're very poor. The Medicel Guard you do expect to break 100 kills, to be honest with you, and that was just a little bit of mismanagement, I think. But yeah, overall Rohan is the MVP, but that's more because no one else really sees that. I think Dark Reaper Death did okay, but can't really give it to anyone from Isengard this time, because Isengard's assault just, it never felt like all that convincing, to be honest with you, and in the end they were reliant on some poor play in the end that gave them the victory. I don't want to sound too harsh, because I think I spent most of this battle actually criticising people. I don't really want to do that, but when I see a battle like this, like, there's not really anything else I can say. Like, it is what it is, I suppose. But yeah, big thank you to Darkwolf44 for sending me this battle replay in. Big thanks to all the players who were in this battle. I'm sure that they're not thanking me because I kind of ripped into most of them on this occasion, but I'm sure in the future I'll be more complimentary of you. But yeah, like next up, I'm not sure what's going to be next up, to be honest. Got a few more like Reforged replays I can do. Like I said, things are a little bit all over the place with regards to sort of what my schedule is, what my plans are, and so on and so forth at the moment. So we'll see. It's again like if I have sort of a concrete idea of what I want to do, then it will be in a channel update video. It won't be wedged at the end of one of these. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this for what it was, because I kind of enjoyed it in spite of the fact that it was kind of a strange battle, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.